state control, you might think that that's the same thing as the state supplying money, but it's not. Sometimes when you talk about monetary reform, people will say, oh, you can't possibly give to the government the right to create money, then they'll have the power to do anything they want. Well, the whole point is that creating money for a government and supplying it to an economy is not so much a power, it's a responsibility. Because once that money is created and supplied on a debt-free basis, it's outside of their control. It is a responsibility, and that was the way it's been framed by monetary reformers. The power of government, in a fiscal sense, really revolves around taxation and expenditure. Monetary creation is a responsibility, and it's a responsibility that they're neglecting. And by neglecting it and ceding it to the banks, they actually, by a curious feedback, acquire greater power. Because what they do is they run this bond system of a national debt in which the economy is perpetually held on the edge of recession and can either be boosted or brought back by the national debt. As countries, I mean, we've seen them for decades now. If you want to boost a country, you know, whop up the annual deficit. If you want to draw it back. So they acquire their power by not creating money, ceding it to banks, running a bond system. To create and supply money is a liberating aspect, which is why the Guild Socialists identified with Douglas monetary reform, social credit, because they saw it as a democratic, free economy which would largely run itself. Obviously, when you're writing about monetary reform, you're going to state the principle that's been the foundation of the critique of fractional reserve banking since the Middle Ages, right through Lincoln, Douglas and all the others, which is that the state should be responsible for providing an economy with a sufficient means of exchange. But that doesn't mean that you should go along and say, government, do this, we want you to do this. It's too sudden at this point. This has not been contemplated by economists for decades. If you have a government in power, they have a responsibility to listen to a profession that advises them. And you cannot expect a responsible government to haul around its economic policy by 180 degrees in complete defiance of all professional advice. That's certainly the case in the UK. There are so few economists who stand up for this type of reform. And so what I would say is take it a stage at a time. And what I've suggested to several monetary reform groups is that they seek a royal commission or public inquiry on money simply to get this out in the open, because nobody's even talking about it. There have been two inquiries in UK history, 1929 and 1959, the Macmillan Committee and the Radcliffe Committee, both of which shed a huge amount of light on this issue and could be used by monetary reformers then as a platform to advancing the cause. I would say, look at what you're actually asking a government to do, and if it is too excessive, take a couple of stages, be a bit strategic about it, because in the end, we do have a professional body of economists, the bulk of which are completely blinkered in their approach. And they, I would suggest, rather than the politicians, are, well, if not the major stumbling block, a major stumbling block. Challenge them. If you desire not to have a debt-based money system, but you need to have money, then you will need another agency to provide the economy with a medium of exchange. I mean, it has actually been advocated to remove number money completely, since that's the product of debt, and make the entire economy function on note and coin. Because note and coin is produced by a government, and it is effectively, by an exchange with banks, it is spent into the economy through social services. That's how notes and coins get there. The note and coin produced by a government is sold to banks. They receive an equivalent amount of bank credit back. It's added to taxation revenue and spent into the economy. It depends how you perceive money. If I mean, if you were to reinvent money here, if you were all sitting down with your pigs, cabbages, I don't know, teachers, skills, ability, medical matters, whatever it was, writers, hopefully, whatever it was that you did that you want to exchange, and you were going around with half a cabbage and someone was going around 3/4 of a pig and, you know, doing tally charts to try and work out who owed who what, and someone said, hey, let's have a token system. Now at that point you would see that the tokens are merely representative of the goods you actually already have, and they're simply to record and facilitate change, to stop you carrying all those items about, and also to subdivide them, because you could have little coins with 1/4 of a pig on them. But they're representative, and they have nothing to do with the government or banks, because they're out there. They're circulating between you lot. Very, very useful they would be too. But the question is, in terms of supply, how are they going to get out there? And the two mechanisms, to put an additional answer to your question, two routes of supply into an economy, were a government to institute a supply of credit into the economy, one route is through government spending, improving the amount that they spent on, obviously not as a speculative measure, but according to some calculations as to what the economic need was in terms of the production of goods, the velocity of circulation of money, what the actual total need was. And to ensure that the economy had that present within it, available for the free exchange and unhindered exchange of goods and services. But the other method, rather than spending into the economy through public services, was the social credit idea, was that if money needs to get into the economy, then pass it direct to people. Now, if we had reinvented money and I came along to you with your pigs, cabbages and all the rest of it and said, look, I had this great idea, don't worry about the half cabbages anymore, put the 3/4 pig on hold, I've invented this stuff called money. And we all sat down and said, look, here are your tokens, go away, come back in a year's time and tell me if it's worked to help you exchange your things. And you came back at the end of the year and you said, yeah, it was really useful, saved an awful lot of bits and pieces being carried around. You'd probably find, incidentally, that one or two of you had prospered and worked very hard. Others may have fallen on hard times or been shifty or just not successful. One or two of you might have been in debt to one another, but you would have been in debt to one another. But if I came along and said, look, I've got this great idea called money, I'll lend it to you. And I lent you all the tokens and said, now go away, come back at the end of the year and tell me how you've got on. And you came back. And you got on probably just as well, and I'd say to you, yes, but you're all in debt to me, and I've got an interest charge here for you as well. You know, there are profoundly different ways of supplying to an economy a device that is so simple, representative of goods and services, required as a circulating medium. You need an appreciation of its different functions in terms of a medium of exchange, store of value, and an item for savings, if you like. You need to interrelate those, and then you need to understand or work out how it's going to be supplied. And it's never really been considered. You see, this is a question that's simply been ignored. What actually happened was that there wasn't enough gold and silver, and goldsmiths had already worked out that they could issue more promissory notes than people came back for, because people didn't want to keep coming back for the gold. And so the goldsmith said, well, I'll tell you what, I lent my gold to him, says on this piece of paper, but he didn't take it. Someone else wants to borrow it, I'll lend him the same money, and him the same money, and him the same money. That was never tackled legally, and it is precisely the basis now of fractional reserve banking. It's a question that has been ignored since the Middle Ages. And precisely the moment that that practice started was when economic booms, slumps and recessions, export pressures, poverty became rife.